when I think about Black Mirror, the things that come to mind, first episode, The Entire History of You.
Oh, yeah.
Where he is, all of the things that have stuck with me have played with the perception of reality, right? So in The Entire History of You, he sees like a very small micro affirmation, right? A very small physical act or engagement that his wife has with a man she seemingly has never met before. And because he has the opportunity to zoom, rewind, fast forward, all of that, he uncovers throughout the course of the dinner the fact that she's had an affair.
Right.
And it completely unravels his reality as he knows it. So that's one.
Right.
Next one is White Bear.
Oh, man, yes.
And White Bear, spoiler alert, that is where a woman wakes up and everyone she encounters is recording her. Kind of like what's happening right now. And it comes out that she is a criminal and is being punished for her inaction when her boyfriend, she helps her boyfriend kidnap a kid. They kill him, or they kill the little girl, whatever it is. But like the people who are observing her, she was inactive and did nothing to help. And so her punishment is every single day they're wiping her memory, and she has to slowly come to this realization. This is like a really low tree.
This is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Adventurous.
Great. And so that part is really fascinating to me because we like to think that there are just certain things we would never forget. There are certain things that we just know innately. And throughout the whole episode, she sees a particular symbol and, you know, the symbol resonates with her. So on some level, she remembers what's happened, the places where it's happened, but she doesn't remember, you know, the horrible stuff.
By the way, if I was asked that same question, those are going to be the first two that I
really
ones that I think of.
I love it. And
The Entire History of You was, I believe, the second or third episode maybe of the first season. The second was maybe 50 Million Merits.
Yes.
And so after seeing that, that's what made me just like a super fan.
Right.
And White Bear, I remember not enjoying the episode until that moment at the very end, and then I was like, oh my God, this is and has become like my favorite moment in the entire series, because that was like a absolute gut punch sort of thing. Right.
And I think the last one would probably be I think it's called White Christmas. And with John Hamm. And some of the parts of that episode that I loved, again, playing with people's reality is sort of a minor part, but when you block people in their reality, you can see the outline, the silhouette, but you can't see or hear them, right? Crazy. So to be disconnected from people, like we talk about it all the time, right? Oh, I blocked this person, or you know, you were somehow connected to someone in that way and you block them, but you always run the risk of what happens if I run into them in person, and you know what happens there. So to have a space where people, you can see the outline, but you can't even hear them, you can't recognize or any sort of connection. You know, for me, I was just really curious to know what that reality is like. So I think those are my favorite episodes.
That's awesome.
That's what comes to mind when I think of Black Mirror.
Look, I couldn't, I don't want to just steal your thunder, but yes, that is it right there. Those are the three, yes, for
sure, right?
Absolutely. So, entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur.
I am.
And you're a CEO.
Yes.
And so tell me a little bit about how things are going on both fronts. What are you up to? How much are you enjoying it? Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, I think I like to say I manage a portfolio of engagements. And if anyone who's watching identifies as a multi-hyphenate or has, multiple interests or anything like that, then this may resonate. But as an entrepreneur, I really feel like it's either in you or it's not, right? I happen to be someone who tended to be at my best when I could kind of see the whole playing field and really just kind of have that whole understanding of an organization, which often meant leading it. And so I was an attorney, and I realized that the problem I wanted to solve was not going to be solved in the courtroom, and that it actually required a different set of skills for leaders. And so that's when I started my consultancy. And through that is where I came to the organization that I'm also leading now. I was originally engaged to develop their people operation strategy, but over time it just really became clear that there was, again, a larger problem that needed to be solved. And I realized that one of my superpowers is acting as a catalyst for change in people's lives and organizations. And so that was how I got here. So I love the space that I'm in because every day there's a new problem to be solved. There's another aspect of my life that I can bring into a space that wouldn't normally connect. The example of that is I started my business after somebody approached me in a salsa class and asked me a question, and it just kind of clicked. And that would not have happened if I hadn't gone to salsa class, or it would have happened differently.
Like a moment of you hearing this question and realizing, oh, there must be other people who have this question, and you both enjoy and have the knowledge and intellect to be able to effortlessly answer it.
Yeah, because what she'd asked me and the example that she gave me was an issue I recently gotten off trial for dealing with. And it was a completely different industry. So I was like, okay, if everyone is having this issue, regardless of industry, there's something here. And that helped me. On my business's Instagram page at BND Consulting.
There we go.
So I would do a lot of reels. And then in repurposing the content, you want to go straight? In repurposing the content, I decided to post the reels on LinkedIn because there were these really, in 10 or 15 seconds, I could speak to a pain point in a way that resonated with the people I wanted to reach, which were senior leaders in organizations. That led to me teaching at Columbia. It was insane, How
did that opportunity open up?
So there was someone who watched the reel and wanted me to speak at a conference, but then said, I'm teaching managing human behaviors in organizations. Would love to have you join me. And so it's those types of opportunities and those types of synchronicities that I think when you open yourself up to being who you are completely, they happen. So of course, a lot of people think that LinkedIn is everybody's buttoned up and very serious and I'm so professional, which is great, right? But people are not always comfortable bringing their full selves there. And so, because I like to create reels, I like the sound, I think it's fun, there's a creative part, and I like to create things that make me laugh. And so, they make others laugh, but also, they're like, yikes. yikes, this is exactly what's going on here. So that led to more opportunity.
Incredible. So you guys, tell me a little bit about your teaching opportunity at Columbia. Like, you had to come up with this curriculum on your own. Like, what did that whole experience look like for you?
Yeah, well, first I have to say she was amazing because she taught it so many times that we were able to partner on the curriculum. So that was pretty much handled. The students were from a lot of different places. Many of them were either European or Eastern European. Others were Chinese. So it was a really interesting clash of cultures because it was the culture of the school, of what it means to be a student, as well as the culture of the organizations that they worked for. And those were all really different. So having them in class, so for example, the students who grew up in Chinese institutions, it is frowned upon to participate. And so the teacher teaches at you, you retain the information, you don't interrupt. It's almost the exact opposite with the European students. And so for us, participation was a critical part of their journey. And so at certain points we had to let them know, like, hey, you're not participating, you know, your grade's kind of going low, and there was that adjustment to, you know, the cultural expectation of the school as it stands versus where they were previously. Yeah, so it's always, I think for any entrepreneur, but especially now, the concerns around funding, sales, right? Developing your go-to-market strategy, because people are so fickle, you know, and very often I'll see, you know, the encouragement, everybody needs to niche down, right? So if you offer services that address a problem that's felt across industries, you can feel that anxiety about, like, oh my gosh, okay, what's my niche, right? What am I going to do? Because I'm not only serving, you know, aardvark farmers in Oregon, you know, I am working with people in the startup space. I'm working with people in enterprise. I'm working with people who are dealing with the challenges of managing people, often in remote spaces. They don't know what motivates them. They don't know how to retain them. They don't know how to lead people who are not like them.
Yeah.
And very often people will lead according to the way they wish that they were led, instead of the way that's really truly best for the organization or best for the person that they're leading, right? So I had a lot of anxiety initially because, again, I identify as a multi-hyphenate, and there are a lot of experiences, and there are certain experiences I've had in the finance industry that's been helpful in the nonprofit space. But if I would have niched down, right, it wouldn't have supported it. So that was the challenge. And then, of course, you know, with sales, like, you need to understand the people you need to talk to. And that kind of dovetails in with, okay, are you niching down? And for me, it wasn't so much the person, but the problem. You know, so I speak to senior leaders who are either about to initiate a huge organizational change or have just had one, who have difficulty retaining people, who have had difficulty transitioning remote spaces, and they need help. They need help themselves as leaders. Maybe they've made a mistake. Maybe they've made a lot of mistakes. Maybe they're now a liability for their organization, but are still valuable and, like, have a wealth of knowledge. So those are the people that I help. And again, that's everywhere. Yeah, so, you know, building trust with people enough for them to give you their coin, I think, is always that connection. And what I see, and I'm sure you've seen it, is a lot of people are afraid to ask for what they want, especially when it comes to money, because people will think, well, if I offer the lowest rate, then I'll get a sale. And that's not at all what's key. You know?
Important.
Yeah. And there's actually, like, we actually tend to have the bias, right? Because if this problem is painful enough for me to seek an outside solution for it, and you're offering me a really low rate, I'm going to actually assume that you're not that great at it, as opposed to assuming, like, what a great deal for me. Like, this is awesome for my company.
Definitely true.
So you definitely don't want to undercut yourself. Yeah, it's been crucial. So again, by nature of what I do, I have a certain amount of self-awareness, but it's helpful to understand what you want to improve upon. So for me, it was embracing the thing that I saw as a weakness and understanding that it was a strength. My being a multi-hyphenate, right? Managing a portfolio, various engagements and experiences. This was the thing that made me different, because I've been an attorney, because I've been an elected official, because I've sat in numerous seats and understand how systems work and the weaknesses there, and how to reinforce the infrastructure of an organization. That's a very unique qualifier that everyone doesn't have. But it took working with other people who've been farther along in their career, not always in age, but just farther along in their career in a different way, to be objective and be like, hey, I noticed you do X, Y, Z. Why don't you talk about that? Hey, you have this experience. Like, why would you not mention that to somebody? That's nuts. And so having a coach is going to increase your self-awareness. It's going to challenge you and make you feel uncomfortable. But if you can withstand that discomfort, you're going to grow. And so anybody who's looking for a coach, have a general idea of what you would want to solve, but also be open to receiving feedback that you may not have initially identified. Because that is usually, you know yourself, right? So you're like, I know what I need. But they may actually point something out to say, like, hey, the way that you work, the way that you speak, the way that you lead, right? This is what's unique to you. Or, hey, I realize that your business model or your brand identity, you're trying to model yourself after somebody that you're not alike at all. So how can we create a space that is more unique to you? How can we honor who you are and uplift who you are and make who you are an attraction point? And that's really kind of where that authenticity piece is, and that also opens you up to opportunities. So as I was telling you before, you know, one of my mentors said, you know, I'd never make a decision without creating all of my options. And part of having an executive coach is learning to create those options, learning to figure out what is what's doable, what you want, you know, what makes sense. And so that's been my experience. It's been really positive. Right. For me, it's been crucial because as I've entered different spaces, so working in the nonprofit space, having a coach who was storied in the nonprofit space but has also had a consulting business was super important for me. And having someone, if you're an entrepreneur of any sort, you want an executive coach. 9 times out of 10, they'll be an entrepreneur because they'll have their executive coaching business. But you want someone who understands the practical challenge, there's one thing, you know, there's theoretical and then there's practical. You can read about, or you can like go on YouTube and watch a bunch of videos about an entrepreneur's journey. It's completely different when you're an entrepreneur and you're looking at your monthly operating expenses and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to pay everybody and pay myself. Or I don't know how to go into this negotiation because they brought up the fact that I don't have extensive experience here as a way to reduce my rate. So I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah.
You know, and those are very real instances and ways that people can be benefited by having an executive coach, because this person can practically walk through all of the objections that you've likely heard and received.
Sure.
And then, you know, help you through it.
Last question. Did you enjoy yourself today?
I did. I'm so glad the weather broke here.
Yeah.
So it's been a joy, and you know, it's always great to see you.